waiting for the high sign. Like that.
Sounds good.
Check this mic.
Just setting things up here.
Yeah. How's your day going?
It's good. You? It's 8 a.m. It was 8 a.m. on Sunday, so
Yeah.
as good as it can.
Stacy is traveling for work this week, so.
Oh, summer parent.
So fun.
God.
Okay, hang on.
All right. No, that actually was.
Well, what do we need to check it about?
Just to run through the service real quick. So, welcome, feeling well.
The one's sort of big.
Yeah.
Then all four verses of Mission Grace.
Yeah.
Also Peter out. Betsy takes the evening rest. Chalice. How do you want to come out of this? Are we using that? No?
Yeah.
Let's use that. Fire City Offertory. Nothing here unless he wants to do it. Will you introduce and close it?
Yes.
Okay, you'll introduce it and then I'll play. Perfect. And then I'll play over the close and welcome.
All right. Let's see. Mo, do you need a sound check from me? Can I make sure? Yes, I can.
That is an important.
It is on. Let's see. Testing this mic. Sounds like it might be live. That sounds good. We're doing this a little later because I'm single parenting this weekend, which means that my daughter had a brief but sharp mutiny 10 minutes ago. Okay, they're good. This is the day we have been given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Good morning. I'm the Reverend Dr. Oscar Sinclair. My pronouns are he, him. Since August 1st, I've served as Unity's senior minister. It is good to be together this morning. If this is your first time here at Unity Church, you are welcome here. If this is not your first time, you are also welcome here. If you're joining us online, know that you are welcome here. If you are here in the sanctuary, in this gathered space, you are welcome. If you have come to be spiritually nourished, whatever that looks like for you, know that this is a place to do that. We hope you find Unity Church to be a place that helps you find and keep your balance, and a community that inspires you to live a life of integrity, service, and joy. Your gifts and your wounds are welcome here. I do want to extend a special welcome for those of you who are visiting this morning. In the front of your pew, in front of you, there is a visitor card. If you could fill that out and place it in the offering basket when it passes by, we would appreciate it so that we know who you are and how you prefer to be contacted going forward. Also, if you're visiting this morning, or if you're following along with this program, are finding yourself at Unity program for visitors and interested friends is happening in the center room behind me this morning when we get done with this service at about 10:15. The topic this morning is Unity's work on social justice and community outreach. So now, take a moment, find some place of comfort in the pew, get your spine straight, feet flat, as we enter into worship with the pealing of our bell.
More of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Our call to worship this morning comes from Mary Oliver, her poem, Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the ocean, clear blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things.
If you would please read the words printed in your order of service as we light our chalice. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith, the light of truth, and the warmth of love.
I'm sure we all have those epochs of our lives. One for me is life before kids and life after becoming a parent. So much of my Unity experience and memories are intertwined with my kids' involvement here that it can be a foggy memory to access my Unity time, BK. Even our early involvement at Unity essentially involved kids, just not ours. The first significant way that Drew, my spouse, and I became involved here was as coming-of-age leaders. That was back when the program was strictly a volunteer-led endeavor, and the curriculum, as it were, was handed down in binders and notes from one volunteer team to the next, with constant iterations taking place based on who was running it that given year. This was before the idea of 5 theological questions that agers wrestled with and responded to. Oh, they did their statements. That was the culmination, but the framework was not really formed in any intentional way. As our merry band of leaders one year met to plan and prepare for the key moments, I think it might have included Jamie and Marion Seeley Kreisman, Shannon and Zach Stephen, David Kreisman, and I'm sure others I'm leaving out. Our work and conversation made something become clear to me. We were asking the youth to understand how their spirituality took shape within them, in their inner being, and how it could be experienced and lived as a member of this community, how we experienced our faith being among one another, and even further, what did that mean to expressing our faith and beliefs beyond ourselves, out into the larger community, being of service to others as an expression of that faith. Within, among, beyond. This became an intentional framework for our curriculum, making sure we were balancing a focus of these 3 orientations as we explored our topics and guidance and preparation for the youth to form and share their statements of belief. A year or 2 in, this was how we talked about coming of age when Rob and Jan were just becoming our ministers. Their leadership was beginning to take root, and Rob, as our COA ministerial guide, met with us often to offer support, introduce us to those 5 questions that the youth answered today, shaping COA even more. I don't know when I first heard those 3 words, within, among, beyond, echoed back to me, to us, applied to different programs or church conversation, but I've always smiled a bit and marveled at how ideas get into the mainstream, how they change and become owned by many, not just a few. In fact, in talking to Reverend Oscar about this service, he reflected that he had heard within, among, and beyond as an organizing structure sometime at Meadville Lombard Seminary and had a vague memory that it had come from Unity Unitarian. We are constantly changing, and an idea or a framework or a phrasing is being born today or will come from our work with Reverend Oscar, perhaps our work on our next set of end statements that might find its way through our minds and hands and hallways and find its way out into the bigger world. Let us always be open and willing to hear the new ideas and nurture them to grow and change the world.
Each time that we gather for worship, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. Let us take that moment now. I invite you just to take a deep breath together. Release. Maybe scrunch up your shoulders. Does it feel like they could use a little? Close your eyes if that is comfortable for you, or just rest your gaze. We're entering into a time of meditation, reflection, and prayer. The members of this beloved community provide compassionate care and presence to one another with our prayers, our greetings and wishes, the cards that we write and the emails and texts that we send to one another, a smile or an embrace in the coffee hall. Each unique and dear person is sewn into the exquisite tapestry of community by the threads of our relationships. By our sharing and our caring, we hold and are held by one another. Today, from among our community, we lift in our caring embrace Michelle Bricker West as she mourns the death of her father, Charles Bricker, who died in hospice on October 9th. We hold Michelle and Ray and their children, Lucy, Toby, Tilly, and Joachim West, in our tender care at this time of grief. We lift up and hold in our healing embrace Kathy and Mark Tchaikovsky, who are both suffering with bronchitis. Kathy's heavy coughing combined with osteoporosis resulted in a fractured vertebra that will need surgical repair. We send our prayers for healing and support. We also continue to send our healing prayers to Becky Gonzalez Campoy, who is joining our worship this morning online from her hospital bed, where she's recovering from emergency heart surgery that she had on October 3rd. Becky, we're happy to hear that you're doing so well. We also lift up into our embrace and our care the 14 youth and 3 staff who are on a Boston pilgrimage right now. They left last Wednesday and they're returning tomorrow. 14 11th graders exploring the history and abundance of Boston and community together. Godspeed, pilgrims. We know that among us, there are people facing many of life's challenges. There are those grieving a loved one who has died or who, due to illness, is no longer present in the way that they once were to share in life's joys. Among us here, there are people struggling financially to make ends meet and are facing uncertainties about their futures and their careers, longing for stability. Among us are those who struggle with mental health and those who love them unconditionally. Those who are facing medical challenges, their own or a beloved's, working through what are the next steps, what is the new normal. We lift those among us whose daily spiritual practice involves raising and caring for children. And among us too, as always, are those who are celebrating life's joys with love and hope for a promising future, new adventures that await. Our hearts expand to hold all of these truths and so many more as we bear witness to one another. I invite you at this time to share into this holy sanctuary or in the silence of your heart the names of those that you wish to hold in our collective embrace. Please join me in prayer. Spirit of life and love and compassion, source of all that is good and wise and true. We gather today with thankful hearts, some in celebration and some in sorrow. We are mindful of the complexities, holding all the beautiful newness of life, the turnings of the seasons of our lives, and the painful brokenness of our world in so many ways. So alongside our thanks and our praise, we hold our fears, our worries, our hurts and regrets. And this morning, let us not forget to lift up our own mistakes, the places and times that we have fallen short. What we sense is our own brokenness. And let us confess and own that none of us is perfect, and there are times that we fall short of being our best selves. And yet, we are here. We are here seeking belonging, inspiration, connectedness, a way forward. We do not strive for perfection, but for learning how to be better, to do better. We strive for transformation within ourselves in order to transform the world. And in doing so, in forgiving ourselves and one another, may we begin again and again and again in love. Let us enter into a time of silence for your individual reflections. Amen.
Unity Church is framed by statements of conscience, known as end statements. And one of those is this: that our members generously give and openly receive compassionate care in times of joy, sorrow, and transition. Our compassionate care extends beyond the walls of this church to communities with whom we share a common interest Each week, the larger portion of our offering goes to support one of these community partners. This morning, that community partner is the Jeremiah Program. Located in St. Paul's Summit University neighborhood, Jeremiah Program supports single mothers and their children as they pursue career paths, life goals, and chart pathways to economic mobility. A group of Unity Church volunteers provides meals for the mothers and their children several times a year. This collection will provide personal hygiene products as well as supplemental apartment needs for the infants, children, and mothers at the Jeremiah Program. Will the ushers now please come forward? May the work of our hands and the generosity of our hearts be given in gratitude this day. Let the offering now be taken.
A reading from Church Leadership by Lovett Weems. The capacity for preserving an organization, its values, and its mission lies in continuous renewal and regeneration. There's a simple and familiar cycle through which organizations tend to move, from initial vision to maintenance to decline. In the early days, the vision is very pure and is the dominant characteristic of the organization. There is passion about purpose and mission. Later comes a time when the organization takes on institutional characteristics, without which it could not continue to make significant social impact. However, in this stage, there is enough distance from the initial vision that maintenance of the organization comes to the fore, and vision often wanes. Then, when the organization becomes cut off from its source of power, its initial purpose and vision, it moves into decline. Is this cycle inevitable? No, but it can change only if there are moments of recapturing or renewing the vision. In this way, a new cycle begins. The new vision is connected to the original vision, but is enough of a new manifestation of the vision that renewal is possible. In the lives of healthy organizations, there is an endless interweaving of continuity and change. The scientist is an example. What appears to us as change and innovation is only possible because the scientist is part of a tradition and an intellectual system. It's a system that provides for its own continuous renewal. According to Giamatti, we do best when we remember institutions change so they may endure with a sense of their purpose and dignity, which sense is what differentiates endurance from mere survival. The only way to preserve values over time is to be involved continually in renewal and change, thus finding ever-fresh expressions to those values. When any organization decides it will seek to save its life by building walls against change, that organization is destined to lose its life, its vitality. It is through such concepts as continuity and change and stability and motion that we may find the path that leads to every renewing organizational life. Ongoing vision becomes the means for this renewal. If a compelling vision is not present, or if the organization is not seeking a vision, then a vacuum is created. The result will be either no vision, or, more likely, the presence of many small competing visions. In either case, the result is decline.
Lovett Weems has seen a few churches in his day. I've known him as the founding director of Wesley Theological Seminary's Lewis Center for Church Leadership, where he has spent 20 years before retiring just last year. This was theoretically his retirement gig, a distinguished posting after 18 years as president of St. Paul Theological Seminary in Kansas City, and a career before that serving Methodist churches around the country. And I knew him best as a teacher who would deliver pithy sentences developed over 50 years of ministry that distilled down some piece of the job into relatively easily remembered nuggets. Always tell your congregation you are proud of them, especially when you are asking them to do something big. Especially when you are asking them to do something big that they do not want to do. It is not enough to be right, he would say. The real test is not primarily our own intellectual or moral purity. The real test is effective ministry. Or one of my favorites, in churches, lots of people have the power to stop things. Just think about that one for a minute. But while Lovett's Hallmark cards of effective ministry advice span generations of ministers and practically every area of church life. The theme that his books and teaching often come back to is the messy, complicated, and necessary work of discerning a vision, a next faithful step for institutions. There is a well-trodden path of institutional formation and stagnation. A compelling vision starts a new thing. Over the years, you need maintenance systems to maintain that vision. Eventually, the maintenance systems become the thing that drives the institution. That ends in decline. The key to sustainability, then, is counterintuitively not sustainable maintenance, but renewal of vision. It is hard to recruit the 18th committee chair of a project that has been struggling to generate volunteers but has existed for 60 years. It is easier to ask, what is the new thing that we are being called to do, and who will help lead it? So change is important in congregational systems, but it's also not change for change's sake. Lovett would also remind us often that the most vibrant churches do not fundamentally change who they are over the years. Instead, churches ask, what is the action we are called to take in order to become more of who we have always been? I'm going to say that again because we're going to spend a lot of time on it this morning. What is the action we are called to take in order to become more of who we have always been? Rather than becoming something wholly new, the call is to deepen identity, to find the things that make the institution beautiful, unique, needed in the world, and then do more of that. We've been thinking about change and tradition over the course of the last month in worship, but primarily in this context of institutions, of churches. But we might also think about this set of questions about change and continuity in our own lives. How do we fall into patterns of maintenance, become static, and decline? And how might we respond not through wholesale reinvention, but through a deeper understanding of who we are, to become more of who we have always been? There is an important theological note here, because questions of how or whether we must change as individuals when asked in a church carry a lot of theological baggage, right? Truly, truly, I tell to you, Jesus says in the Gospel of John, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Amazing grace, the hymn goes, that saved a wretch like me. Those are statements about the necessity of change, but they also have implications about human nature, that humans as born require transformation, are somehow incomplete until acted upon. I don't see that. Please don't hear that in this sermon. Our liberal tradition does not share Amazing Grace's rather dim view of human nature, even as I love the song and the metaphor of it. Instead, we have, at worst, a neutral view of human nature. We are wonderfully made, you and I, creatures of stardust and poetry who are capable of great acts of love and great acts of horror. But saying that we are born complete is not the same as saying we cannot or should not grow. We do grow, develop, change. We all go through seasons of life. I recognize who I was as a teenager, as a young Peace Corps volunteer, as a minister in my first call, but all of those are different people. Parenting has changed me. Ministry has changed me. I have changed both through external events that happened to and around me, and I have changed through choices that I have made. It is the same for all of us. Stasis is not a condition of life. We don't have to be saved, but biologically, we are built for transformation. True of people and true of churches. Looking at the history of unity, I can see the same church culture here from 1953. Something essential remains 70 years since the topic of our sermon last week. And we have changed. This congregation's engagement with anti-racism has changed us. The national UU conversation about the language of reverence, about using words like God or prayer in a worship service, changed us. Telling complex stories that push back against oversimplified narratives of what happened back then changes us. Each time we renew the end statements, we renew our vision for this place, we're choosing to lean into that change. But when we do it well, it isn't a fundamental break from what has been before, but an evolution. One statement, Lovett Weems writes, can capture both past and present, and it can galvanize a congregation to do what they never expected to do until they realized they had no choice if they wanted to be more of who they have always been. One statement can galvanize. One statement sitting in a COA planning meeting saying, you know, this looks like within, among, and beyond, can become an organizing principle for a whole congregation. Last week, as I sat down to write this sermon, was National Coming Out Day. I remember the day my sister told me she thought she might be gay, and the day not long after when she told me about meeting Lindsay, and the day I got to not work at her wedding, instead standing next to her as she and Lindsay exchanged rings and vows. Each of those days felt like a sea change, a profound shift in how my sister moves through the world. And at each of them, I've watched her become not somebody different, but more of who she has always been. When I asked her permission to talk about this in a sermon, she wrote back better than I could have put it. Coming out is not one singular event. For me, it was a year or so long process from, oh, this fictional character is pretty hot, to coming out to myself and you simultaneously, and the several months of angst that entailed, to meeting the most incredible girl I'd ever set eyes on, to then coming out to the people I trusted the most, and then to the public. That whole thing was about a year. And we still have to come out all the time when we meet new people, move to a new place, start a hobby, all of that. I just came out to a couple new coworkers. And every time, it's like letting someone into a piece of who I am and handing them that bit of trust to know the true me. Remember Lovett Weems? The only way to preserve values over time is to be involved continually in renewal and change. Now, coming out is a risk, and riskier to people you do not know, so a big thank you to my sister, hopefully on the live stream, for trusting me to tell that story. She did have one condition, based on our shared history and loves, that I admit from this pulpit and on camera, that the Detroit Tigers did better in the playoffs than the Baltimore Orioles this year. Thanks, sis. And the Orioles are still the better baseball team. That one was from me. But aside from an unpleasant admission of academic futility, what this tells me is something really important. That the work of transformation, the work of intentional change, either personally or institutionally, requires self-knowledge. requires examination. We transform not to become something new, but to become more of the best versions of ourselves. The moment of change, then, is not simply in the present, but it is the bridge that connects the past and the future. In the ongoing work of change, we can find the through line through our personal and institutional identities. The day or days my sister came out connects the person that I knew when she was an annoying little kid sister to the person who got married and bought a house with her spouse. It's that moment of change that provides the connection between those two things. They're all the same person, and the moments of change deepen who that person is in the world, becoming more and more of who she has always been. Institutionally, there's a through line at Unity from William Channing Gannett's work with the Freedmen's Society in the 18th century to Arthur Foote's work on deinstitutionalization in Minnesota, through the Eller Isaacs commitment to anti-racism. This congregation, the institution, has held all of those ministries, using each to deepen its understanding of the linkage between spiritual practice and justice, right through Reverend K.P. Hong's work developing the double helix model to make that connection explicit. Not something new, more of who we have always been. We were talking about the double helix in 1890. We just didn't have words for it yet. Our job as churches is to change. That's how we avoid stasis and eventual stagnation. Instead, we catch a vision and renew our shared ministry, not as a break with the past, but as a chapter in the story. When we do this work as individuals, the continuity between the past, the present, and the future is our sense of self. Churches don't have an innate sense of self in the same way, but hold change and progress nonetheless. Progress is real, the author Jonah Goldberg wrote recently, yet it is not stored in our genes or souls, but in institutions and traditions. Human nature, he would write, is ahistorical. It does not change from generation to generation, but what allows us as a community, as a species, to move forward, to become more of who we have always been collectively, is the institutions and rule structures that we build. I would add also the stories that we tell. There's the thing that happens in every new ministry, right? A new minister comes in and it feels like a fundamental change, a break from what has happened before. A whole lot gets read and projected onto new ministers, new ministries, new chapters in a congregation's life. And things change for sure. There's a special meeting of the congregation next week to change the date of our annual meeting. That is a change that is happening. Please take out your this week at Unity and read up on that. We won't dwell on it in the sermon, but please come to the meeting next week so that we have a quorum. But this is my last time preaching on this theme of change this fall. And I want to end on this particular point. Change is, in the context of church, unavoidable, desirable, and a deepening rather than a fundamental break. I have no interest in making Unity Church something that it is not. That would be a terrible way to start a ministry. And I don't think there's anything fundamentally broken with the church institution or with us as people. It's not my understanding of how people or institutions work. And the Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi said, "Each of us is perfect the way we are, and we can use a little improvement." Not someone or something new, more of who we have always been. more of what this place has always been. You do not need to be born again. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. But neither are you static. Neither are we static. You, we, are stories. And stories are not static things. They change every time we tell them, becoming deeper, more complex, and telling us more about ourselves every single time. The world offers itself to our imagination, and in doing so, we deepen who we are. May it always be so, and amen. Our closing hymn is number 128 in the gray hymnal, For All That Is Our Life. Would you please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing? To build the common good and make our own days glad. We have been doing that a long, long time at this place. The question now is not how we will change doing that, but how we will deepen how we do that, how we will become more of who we have always been. So as we extinguish our chalice and we listen to one more piece from the piano, take a moment and think about what that is for you. Where will you deepen this year? Not changing who you are, but becoming more of who you are. Amen.